Come on in, sir. All yours.
Now alcoholic. Good to be with everybody this evening. Thank you for asking me. I assume that this is a group of AA fanatics. I, I was raised in a group like that, so it had a lot of impact on my life. Sobriety date's May 5th, 1987. That's because Alcoholics Anonymous has worked under any and all conditions for me. So far, so good. If I will and if I can. I don't get me without you. This connection to me is vital for recovery. We need each other. You need me. I need you. We do need each other. And my fifth step's always incomplete without yours. So I'm always looking for another fifth step. And the online participation has supplied me with a lot of fifth steps. And I'm very, very happy about that. Um, yeah, I was in a meeting the other day. I was laughing when you're doing all that. These readings were great and spelling out that this meeting's for alcoholics. It's you'd be surprised in our big, beautiful fellowship that I love so much that a lot of people don't even know the difference between an open and closed meeting. Um, and I think that we should know those things, uh, that alcoholics participate in an AA meeting. And it's important. Identification is really important here. There's a guy that's 30 years sober in my area, and he he'd probably be a little threatened in this group. He thinks that just don't drink is the key to AA. Uh, oh my gosh. My problem when I stop drinking, I get an over concentration on myself. It's pretty powerful. And I end up drinking again. I was in a meeting this morning and I was talking about this incredible, like when we look at these 10-step promises, and one of the sentences jumped out at me the other day it's funny that this can really be slow sobriety sometimes. You can read it many, many times and then you realize it. And that's been my experience with the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I've read it many times, but then I realize things. It says, "Will seldom be interested in liquor." Now think of that for a minute, that type of promise coming out of a guy like me that I'm a daily drinker, I'm a morning drinker, I'm an all-day drinker. I'm a drinker that the book describes of the hopeless variety. I have the obsession, I have the phenomenon of craving, and I have the progression. And and now we're free of that we're seldom interested. And those promises in there are very significant for an alcoholic like me. Um, like we used to hear in meetings, at least sometimes in my area, that you have a choice whether you drink or not. Yeah, okay. You you don't suffer from what I suffer from. First step says we're powerless over alcohol, okay? That means I've lost the ability to choose, okay? And my first sponsor said the ultimate choice is in we agnostics, be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. And what AA does, it allows us to live on a spiritual basis. It gives us a set of directions for that. I always say that I think I don't know, first time that maybe in history God numbered himself 1 through 12. And we end up with a relationship with a higher power. I believed in God before I got here, but that's as far as it went. Uh, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and through the steps and the relationships I have with you and the things that we talk about, the home group, and I've ended up with a relationship with a power greater than myself, and I don't have to explain that. I experience it. I'm a conservative AA member. I don't mean to step on anybody's toes. Sometimes I'm very non-controversial. Sometimes I am. I'm one of those guys that I don't understand why we have a plain language big book. I just don't. I'm a little concerned about that. Um, we have this significant spiritually inspired book, God's thumbprints all over it. It changes lives like nothing has ever. From the inside out, we're changed. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, look, we need to have something for a fifth grade level. And what happened to those stories that we heard that the guy went into the penitentiary to help out the person that was in there, and he couldn't read, and he read in the big book, and he learned how to read through the big book. How many times did we hear those stories here that we helped each other? If we couldn't read, we helped you to read, and that was part of that experience of one alcoholic talking to another. And then to have a non-alcoholic write a spiritual book like that, I mean, you, whether it's a rewrite or a translation, it ain't going to come out the same. I'm an advocate of keeping Alcoholics Anonymous, because it updates itself. And I'll share a little bit of that. And we might have different experiences here. And that's the thing in AA. Don't be threatened by that. Sometimes we have different experience. We can be in the big book and we can have different experiences in the big book. I sponsor a guy and he came to me and said, yeah, we were arguing in the big book. Bill said this and Bill said that, and that was right and that was wrong. And I said, well, maybe you're all right if you're doing it. You guys sober? Do you have a quality of life sober? Have you done what's in the big book? Then why are you arguing about stuff like that? I've been a student of the history of Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, and I haven't seen anything that Bill said exactly this is what I meant by that. And then as a student of the history, we come by, we say, well, Bill wasn't a great historian, and maybe he wasn't. And he might have missed it on this one, and he might have missed it on that one, and that date was wrong. But our book said this is the story, not the historical document. We get sober in people's stories, experience strength and hope when we start to share this. So, I'm a guy that came here the first time in 1982, and I had a reservation, and that's not good. When you have a reservation, whether you're going to drink or not, it's not good for an alcoholic like me. And I did drink again. I came 10 months. I went to a meeting every day for 10 months. I stopped at step 5. I had a sponsor. I had a home group. I had a job in the home group. I went to a lot of meetings, but I had a reservation. And whenever you have a reservation, you may be in trouble. I drank again. And once you pop that top on King alcohol, I'll tell you one thing. I remember I went to Georgetown, Washington, D.C., and I went to this bar. It's no longer there. It was the Bayou. And I ordered a Heineken after 10 months of sobriety, and I drank it. And then I drank another one. And maybe on that third one, it's a long time ago now. I think it was 3. Who knows? I got a sensation. It was so incredible that I remember saying, I don't want to part with this again. And I spent the next couple of years I'll tell you, it was downhill from there. Like Bill said, like a ski jump, it just downhill. And so this time when I came back, um, I didn't have the reservation. It was gone. And I came to meetings, and all I knew that I heard, and most of us heard this too. I didn't know any better at that time. So so don't start throwing tomatoes, but I embrace the 90 meetings in 90 days, and the meeting makers make it, all the stuff that we hear. Uh, just don't drink one day at a time, which is fine. And I put together, uh, I don't know, it was probably 2 years. And I'd taken the steps off the wall. I had an off the wall program. I'd listen to this speaker. This is before at a conference level, the speakers changed after Joe and Charlie came in 1980 in the international. They changed. At first, they were threatened and they didn't like the big book speech because most of them have been doing the 12 and 12 and or their version of the steps. I know in some parts of the country it may have been a little bit different, but overall, I went to a lot of conventions because my sponsor was a convention taper. So I got to hear these guys, and the big book was not as prevalent as it is today, or as Joe and Charlie started to become very popular. And what happened to me, I had the Steps Off the Wall program, and this guy gave me a tape of Joe and Charlie, original Joe and Charlie, Joe McQueenie and Charlie Parmley, and I went and saw them. And that night, I'll never forget, I'm in Contanning, Pennsylvania, and there's a snowstorm. And so Joe and Charlie got snowed out that night. They had to go from pick them up in Pittsburgh and bring them there, and it was a lot of snow. But I went into this meeting, and these people all had big books on the table and leather bound big books with circles and triangles on it. I'd never seen this before. And I'd gone to a lot of meetings. And for the next hour and a half, there was a conversation that happened in that meeting that I had never heard before. It was a big book conversation about recovery, about the directions in the big book. And I never, I mean, I was kind of stunned, to tell you the truth. I had heard all the other stuff that we had heard. And next day, Joe and Charlie came in, and they kind of lit the place up. And by Sunday morning, I was a changed person. I believe it was a spiritual experience. I felt like I had been in two Alcoholics Anonymouses, and it was totally different. And so, unfortunately, like a lot of us, when we get a taste of that, we weaponize the big book and we go around and beat the local folks up over the head. Those poor people. Some were 30 years sober. I don't think they'd ever taken the steps. And here comes this guy with the big book. And I don't think it went real well. I had to learn how to kind of change my approach. So it worked a lot better. It's a lot better to walk out of a meeting with people talking to you, walking out of the meeting by yourself all the time. And I think some of us go through the rigidity stage. I help people that do that sometimes. They'll get real because they'll get on fire with this, and then they'll get rigid about it. And they'll weaponize the big book, and that will start to turn off people. That's what I did. And my life changed significantly. But the first thing that, as I got into the big book, first thing that I had to do, I needed to get financially sober. I was in a lot of debt, um, and it just wasn't going well. And so as I started to get into the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started to get into these steps, there's different versions of steps, believe it or not. AA. I was mostly in a 12 and 12 step studies most of the time. And now all of a sudden there wasn't any big book studies yet, you know? And so this guy, I asked him for help, and he said the thing that I want you to do first, and the first part of getting financially sober in Alcoholics Anonymous is you need to make financial amends. And so I started to do that. I was $28,000 in bad debt, including credit cards, not paying things back, all sorts of stuff. So I went to a guy outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was my boss. He was pretty well to do, and I asked him for help, and he told me if I would surrender my bank accounts and everything, he would help me out. And he taught me to take $10 here, $10 there, $15, 25, 50. We were paying I mean, a lot of people. We were writing checks every month, and we did that for about the next 9 years. And by making those financial amends and by paying those things back and doing the things I was supposed to do with the money, I got financially sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I got out of debt. And it was really important for me because, one thing the book talks about is I've never seen anybody, people say, oh my God, I don't have all that money. I said, well, just see what they'll work out with you. You'll be surprised when they work out things with you. I mean, they want to get their money. Okay. I haven't seen anybody send a check back. And so that really worked well for me. And I lost my fear of creditors. Um, and I lost my financial fears because I got financially sober. Did I get filthy rich? No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about being financially sober, learning how to grow up with money just like everything else. And so I made amends to where I worked. And, I had lied on my application. I said I had a college degree. I lied a whole bunch on the application. I lied all the time. We all know that. And I went to my boss and I told him that I had lied on the application. And we talked a little bit and I left the office. And the next day he called me in and I was really scared. I mean, I thought, okay, maybe they're going to fire me. I think I don't know how many years sober I was. I was sober for a few years. And he said, you've done pretty well sober here. He said, why don't we put you, we'll finish your college education. We'll pay for it because we'd like to have you now that you're a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. We see it in your work ethic. And they sent me to college. I finished my college education off that amends. I didn't expect that. I didn't go in there to get that. I didn't even know that was going to happen, you know. And I can give you amends after amends on that. That I didn't go in there trying to get anything. And I ended up with things like that. And so I became a real advocate of amends. I know you can get thrown out of the office every once in a while, but I became an advocate. You need to make your amends. Watch what happens. Um, Look at those 9-step promises. The realization of AA just keeps happening to me. And probably about 5 months ago, I was sitting there. We read them in meetings up here. They close the meetings with the 9-step promises, and I finally just realized something. It was the absence of spiritual depression. It was the absence of self-loathing. It was the absence of self. Now, I don't know in your area, and again, I hope you don't fall out of your chair or throw tomatoes at me, but some of the meetings I go to, because there's a lot of newcomers, is that one of their mottos is, we'll love you till you learn to love yourself. And I'm like, well, one thing that our book echoes to us, and I know when you're neurotic and you're down on your luck and things aren't going right, and you hear something like that, it sounds soothing, it does. But on the same level, it's also full of self-reliance. And one thing that our book talks about, and a very loud sentence in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, isn't because self-reliance failed. Okay. And at the end of those promises, it says we suddenly realize that God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Now, are these exact extravagant promises? We think not, correct? Um, hmm, Whoops. I had to say something to my wife there. um, so if we suddenly realize that God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves, that's pretty significant, right? It's just like when you look at the bedevilments on page 52, okay? They don't look good, right? Uh, if and this is what I share with people that sometimes are struggling in sobriety. If you believe those bedevilments are symptoms of a clinical problem, that's an outside issue. Okay. We just don't deal with that because we all don't have it. We're not getting on you. We're not in conflict with you. It's an outside issue. If you believe those bedevilments are the symptom of a spiritual malady, we got the solution to it because it's spiritual. All right. Now, years ago, I was struggling. I was in the middle of a separation, all sorts of stuff. One of those black mood times that Bill Wilson described. I was in a black mood, all right? And it just wasn't going well. I went to my friend in Baltimore and I was discussing it with him. He was a big old Irish man that always laughed. He was full of enthusiasm. Um, and he said to me, that, you know why you're depressed? I said, well, Tom, why am I depressed? He says, you're thinking about a very depressing subject. And I said, what was that? He said, yourself. And I was a little shocked. And I said, well, then what do I do, Tom? He says, you need to find a God bigger than you. I said, I need to find a God bigger than me. He said, yeah. And I said, well, how do I do that? He said, that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is about. And I never had to ask that question again. That I need to find a God bigger than me. And that's what our steps produce. One of the things they produce. The other thing that our steps produce is something a lot of people are looking for in life is meaning and purpose. Okay. And we're given meaning and purpose here. Yeah. We're given the ability to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And our message is a spiritual awakening as they resolve these steps, not just don't drink and go to meetings. Okay. That's our message. It's a personality change sufficient to recover. Isn't that what the spiritual experience talks about? Um, Pretty good stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous is good medicine. So I want to get into with the let's see, where did Eric go? Eric, how much time do I have left? I didn't time myself, just tell me.
You have 25 minutes left. And if you if,
Thank you.
if you see Derek, the upper right-hand corner, there's a timer up there.
Okay, I didn't see the timer yet. I see it now. I see Derek now. Thank you. All right. So, I started with Joe and Charlie, and I ended up in Colorado with Don Pritz, and I went through the steps with him. And, I went through steps with different people in different parts of the country. I had a lot of different upbringings in the steps, and I'm glad for that. And I had um, three of my sponsors were sponsored by Clancy, and I really got, I think, the gift of structure in Alcoholics Anonymous, which really, really helped me out a lot, being meetings on time and how you treat the meetings. So one thing that I realized over the years that really helped me with my relationship with meetings, and it took me a while to see this, that it was an avenue to service. As long as I was expecting I'm going to get something from the meeting, I would probably let down, maybe, I don't know. But when I turned my mind to the idea that this is an avenue of service, what can I give to the meeting? And how can I be effective? How can I practice page 18 and 19 in the book, in the top of 19 in the book, which is incredible. Okay. So it says no holier than thou attitude. All right. And then when I was weaponizing the big book, I didn't know it. I had a swollen ego because I was so much on fire. So one thing that we do is we have no holier than thou attitude. Okay? Okay, we understand the solution and the problem because we've experienced that. We can carry that now. We can share with another alcoholic exactly what the problem is. It's outlined in the doctor's opinion all the way up to We Agnostics, the fourth chapter. You know, we can share what the solution is from the fourth chapter to me, the seventh chapter, and I love the vision for you. And the chapters in between, there's a lot of gold mines in there. People say, I don't read the family afterwards. Well, you ought to. I don't read Too Wise. Well, you ought to. Two employers, the word spiritual and God's not even in there. Well, read it. There's some good stuff in there, you know. So it talks no axes to grind, no lectures to endure, no people to please. That we have a sincere desire to be helpful. And when I carry that way into a meeting, if the poor lady up front is chairing the meeting on that the poor dog died today because she got him the wrong dog food, I don't even care what she said because I'm going to bring the message of Alcoholics Anonymous into that meeting and share my experience so I can attract the alcoholic in there that's sick and needs this message. I can't tell you how many times that's worked. And then I didn't walk out of the meeting angry because the poor chairman didn't know how to lead the meeting. I found a place in that meeting to be useful, and I think that's one of the things that we talk about here is being useful. A lot of maybe a lot of you knew him or didn't, but Don Pritz, he was quote unquote spiritual advisor. I don't know if he liked that term. The big book uses it, but I was with him for a long, long time. And one thing that he always said was, one thing I've been looking at in the big book, but I haven't found yet, Al. And I said, what's that, Don? How to successfully criticize somebody. I thought, I've been trying to do it successfully, but it backfires, you know, how to successfully criticize somebody. And the two other things that I found absent in the big book is perfection and rigidity, right? That come with a swollen ego. Sometimes my ego swelled here. I need to stay here long enough that the swelling goes down. I'd like to share a little bit here with the time that I have left of going through difficult times in sobriety, because I think a lot of us have experienced that. I've had a fantastic life here. Okay. So don't think that it hasn't been, you know. We were talking before the meeting with Chris, and I'm an avid cyclist. You know, I go all over Moab, wherever I can go, Sedona. I bike those areas. I plan trips all over the place. Just came back from New Hampshire and Vermont, biking all over there. I just love it. I've got to do that. Like I said, I got financially sober and own my own property, my own house, all these kind of things. All these things that happen as a result of sobriety, my relationship with the steps, my relationship with the fellowship, ultimately my relationship with God. But there's some toughies sometimes, you know. Life doesn't behave, other people don't behave, and sometimes you can get cluttered. Now, here's a realization I had. You may not have had this realization. I certainly wouldn't be in conflict with you because I've heard different sides of it. A lot of us are stuck in a first step problem when times come and they're tough, and we start getting into that we're powerless over this and our lives are unmanageable because of this. And for me, I say it's not a first step problem. That's what Silkworth told Bill. Bill told Bob. It's the ingredients of that conversation put in the first step. Um, being powerless is I can stop drinking, but I can't stay stopped. Once I pop the top on King alcohol, phenomenon craving takes over. There's no off switch. I have a progressive illness and never gets worse. Never get never gets better. It always gets worse. Drink myself in a hopeless state of mind and body. Okay. My unmanageability for me, and maybe not you, in the first step, the unmanageability is totally tied into my drinking. Okay. What my life was like drinking, the hangovers, the bad decisions, the arrests, all the things that make for an unmanageable life. Poor decisions, erratic emotions. You have a list there in the unmanageability due to drinking. That's how I take people through the first step. I did not have a first step problem. I had a third step problem. And I didn't realize this till my friend, I have a friend that's quote unquote a big book thumper. I like to say that we're big book enthusiasts, but I have no problem with the idea of big book thumper. But I'm a big book enthusiast. And he came to me one day, and this was one of those turning points and realizations because I was in a hard spot. Okay. And he said, Al, what do you think about the third step? And I just came right out of the hatch. It's a decision to go through with the rest of the steps. Okay. Now, I've been sharing that for a long time. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. But he says, have you read the whole thing? I said, yeah, a lot of people do the third step prayer. He said, it's more than the third step prayer, Al. Okay. It's page 60 to the top of page 64. Have you looked at that and read it? And the big book takes on a new meaning and realization when you slow down on reading it. I don't know where we got the idea of speed reading. We go to a big book meeting and we got to get through the whole chapter. And then after we get through the whole chapter, we talk about our day. You know, it's like, did you see that sentence? So So I started to look at that third step. And when I realized in my sobriety, I have a third step problem, I don't have a first step problem when things aren't going right. Now, I'm not disregarding the rest of the steps because I think that they all kind of push back into the third step and then we move back out. But I started to really look at that third step, being convinced that any life based on self will can hardly be a success. Hmm. Well, I'm in a separation. My business is failing. I'm really unhappy. The kids got problems. Wow. Right. How about that actor? You thought you killed him? I I think he still exists and comes out in times of stress and unhappiness all over the place. What a great analogy there, you know? So we can wrest satisfaction out of this life if we only manage it well. There's your problem right there. There's your third step problem in sobriety. When if you're drinking and coming in and out, yeah, you got a first step problem. I get all that. And we're going to help you with the first step. And it's easy if you really think about how do you take the first step? It's real simple here. You take the other 11 steps. That opens the door. That really puts a lot of meaning and purpose in the first step when you take the other steps as well. Uh, and I never realized those things. And so when I went through the third step slowly with my friend, now I hate to admit this, but I'm going to share it with you tonight. I was 30 years sober. Okay. I was 30 years sober when that happened. I had that realization of that third step. And it had an impact and change on my life, bar none, when I really started looking at it. But what I came out of the third step with was the successful order of life. And I didn't see this for a long time. And that was big God, big you, little me. It was the beginning of the surrender of self to big God, big you, little me. And every step after that would have the footprints of the third step decision in it. And it really was a game changer for me. And I took a lot of people in later sobriety through the third step. And they were like, when we sincerely took such a position, well, I saw that before. And then I realized that word sincerely took such a position. It just had a new ring to it. My friend was 40 years sober. He was struggling. And we went through it and he goes, man, I need to sincerely take such a position. I said, look at the position you're taking. And that's how Alcoholics Anonymous has worked for me, is it's updated itself over and over and over and over. I'm a big fan of steps 10, 11, and 12. Don't think I'm not. I'm not at all. I mean, Joe McQueenie used to say that's the greatest relapse prevention program in the world, but you got to take the first 9 steps first. And steps 10, 11, and 12 they're pretty incredible. But I'm going through this thing with the guy that I work with, and his daughter's has made 3 suicide attempts. And it's a very difficult position. And I have an autistic kid that's 17 years old, and I had to hospitalize him 2 weeks ago in a psychiatric hospital. He had a meltdown and a breakdown. I'm working with another person that her daughter's angry all day long, ready to quit school, misbehaving, very unhappy child, and it can make the household very unhappy. I mean, some of these long-term things can start to burn you out, and you have to be careful with that. You know, there's some tough things sometimes here in life, and I don't think alcoholics are being picked on. You know, maybe somebody dies that's close to you. Maybe your elderly parents are in the assisted living or have dementia, and you know, maybe there's financial setbacks. One thing I've found that my sobriety has become very useful at this length of time. A lot of troubled people with length of time are attracted to me, and they're having difficulties. And we get to re-examine the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I told them self-knowledge avails you nothing. What you know about the book isn't what's going to change you. It's what you do out of the book. It's what you practice. So I said, you know, what I try to do is live in the living, what I call the winning combination of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because what happens for an alcoholic of my type, there's an intensity to the emotions that happen in these situations. Can get very intense on the on the inside. And two of the emotions that have really probably challenged me the most would be self-centered fear and self-pity. Now, I say self-pity because I've had a lot of resentments from time to time. I don't know about you, but I have had a lot of resentments. And my resentments, if they're more than 3 seconds in my brain, which they are, it turns to self-pity because it's their fault. Okay. But it doesn't look like self-pity because it's their fault. And I've suffered the intensity of that self-pity on a number of occasions. In fact, I used to say till my friend added one, I used to say the things that I've done right since I've been here is I haven't taken a drink of alcohol. I've always gone to meetings. I've always had a home group. I've always believed in God. I've always had a sponsor. I've always loved the book Alcoholics Anonymous once it had given to me. Now, some of those I didn't go anything past those for a period of time. And my friend said, there's one more. I said, what's that? He says, you've always had somebody to blame. No, I haven't. I have had some breaks. They just don't behave, right? So what I share with the people that are struggling and I struggle from time to time, the kid doesn't behave. There's some other things that go on. And I tell them you need to go to a meeting and try to help out another alcoholic. Okay. You're not going to meeting to get something, to get a moment of relief, which might happen. Don't worry about it. Could happen. If it happens, great. But you're going there for one reason. You're going there to carry a message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Okay. Now you can share some of your problem, but make sure you attach the solution to it so people hear the solution, not just the problem. And I said, that's something that I do a lot is I go to the meetings and I try to carry that message. I try to find that newcomer, that older member that's struggling, that may have lost their way here, maybe need some adjustments like we do sometimes. And I said, it's really important. I said, the other thing that I want you to do, and one thing that Emmett Fox talked about, and we pass this around the 11th step a lot, is the golden key, is thinking about God rather than the problem. And I think the 11th step really comes out with that a lot. And in that 11th step, I talk a lot about that pause. Okay. Sometimes, you know, maybe you'll take a nap. Maybe you'll go to a meeting. Maybe you'll just get away from what the problem is and you'll just be able to get quiet. Okay. So we pause when agitated or doubtful. Okay. To me, agitation always leads to resentment and doubt always leads to fear. Okay. When I'm in those 2 positions. And sometimes people are challenging. So we constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running a show. And so we repeat to ourselves many times each day, your will, not mine, be done. And I said two things that I want you to be aware of in these problems as you're practicing this concentration, conscious contact. I want you to be aware of not having morbid reflection. Okay, that's one thing. And number two, of not making foolish decisions, which are hasty decisions. What Don, one time I was talking to Don Major and we were having this conversation and he said, "Hey Al," he says, "you know what I named my home group?" I said, "Don, what did you name your home group?" He said, "I named my home group the Calm Down Group because I needed to calm down." And I thought, yeah, that's Alcoholics Anonymous is a good calm down because there's times that I need to calm down. Okay. So as I bring these actions together, they really start working because everything in AA is connected. It's not a separate idea. Going to me and trying to help somebody out, putting in this 11 step, the Emmett Fox idea of think about God rather than the problem. Okay. The other thing is I need to always be conscious of the practice of steps 10, 11, and 12 in my life. Consciously practice. I'm not saying perfect. I'm not saying sometimes they're better than others, but consciously, like I started out, we're seldom being arrested, which are these 10-step promises. I go over that a lot. That every day is a day we carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve you? Your will be done. Your will be done. These thoughts must go with us constantly, the proper use of the will. These are things I meditate about and think about that are very important. I need to have a home group and I need to have a job in that home group, a place I go every week, no matter what's going on in my life, that I get a breather, that I got a job. I could go set up the coffee. I can set up the literature. Maybe I'm a GSR. Maybe I'm a secretary in the business meeting. There's a lot of jobs in the home group. I need to have a job because I need to always be in that idea of giving rather than getting because my personality is getting rather than giving. And then ultimately, in this winning combination where these intensity of these emotions and these situations have the best of me, is I need to always be focused on and thinking about this reliance on God. What I came out of the third step with is big God, big you, little me. And one of the things we used to say in meetings, and I've kind of changed it just a little bit, is I can't live today on yesterday's program. There's a truth in that. So what AA becomes is a daily surrender. Okay. I used to think the surrender was one or done, or is it done in an increment, or is done 10 years ago, or I surrendered this, or I surrendered when I came in, and now it's a daily surrender. It's a daily surrender of self to the application of the principles, to the attendance at meetings, to the call to the sponsor, because living in the winning combination is this. Now, I bring this up a lot. If you ask an AA who has a sponsor, 99% of that room will raise their hand. No doubt about it. We've done good with that. All right. But if you ask the second question and we're honest, maybe half of the hands in that room go down. How many of you allow your sponsor to sponsor you? It's an entirely different question than having a sponsor. Okay. Because you can have a sponsor, and that's as far as it goes sometimes. But do you allow your sponsor to sponsor you? Okay. What I share with some folks from time to time, and I don't know if you bumped into any of them, but I get some people sometimes as soon as I answer the phone, they launch and they don't stop talking. So the nice thing about the cell phone is you can text them now while they're talking. They'll look, oh, because they can't hear me when I say, hey, hey, because they're so consumed in themselves. So once they take a moment and a breather from being overly consumed in themselves, I asked him, do you want attention or would you like direction? I said, we all need a little attention. I'm not putting that down, but this is about saving your life. You may need direction to this problem. The sponsorship to me is a key action here. It's part of that winning conversation. But I also think that we have to be very careful sometimes that we're not putting too much dependence on the sponsor. When I sponsor people, I really let them know that I don't want you to put all your dependence on me. Okay. It's not going to work for either one of us. I'm here to give you direction. We can have a talk, whatever. But if you think that you got to call me every day with a problem or whatever. Now, sometimes when you're going through stuff like my friend with the girl that his daughter that's 3 suicide attempts and she's in the mental hospital right now. And yesterday he called me and he said, I feel guilty. I said, why? Well, this was 2 days ago. He said, I called the police on her because she attacked me. And they put handcuffs on her in the room, took her out, and then they put her in the ambulance and they handcuffed her to the bed. And he said, I felt a little bit guilty, but I felt relief. I said, that's morbid reflection. I said, if you got relief for a few minutes, you may have needed it. You know, I said, this stuff is tough. All right. This is some tough stuff. And so the question I asked him, I said, how's your relationship with the 11th step right now? And he said, you know what? I've been thinking about God through the whole thing. I said, well, put her on the prayer list. I'll put her on the prayer list too. How's that? This is a sick human being. I said, there's no easy answers to this. We put it in God's hands and we do the best we can. And most of us are not going to get the parent award of the year. So thank you for asking me. Glad to be. Thank you for the timer. And I'll go ahead and pass to the.
Wow, thank you so much, Al. That was amazing.